I prepared for you guys what I hope is going to be something fun. It's called InnerSource Stories from the Trenches. It's basically things that have happened during the various engagements I've had as a consultant around InnerSource with various organizations. I will not name the organizations, no, period. I will not name the organizations. There's banks, governments, press, but I won't, specifically say which applies to who because I'll talk about what has been going wrong and hopefully some elements that can help to work around these things that can well, go wrong. So there's basically three big categories of things that can go wrong, and in this session I will cover these three, probably other ones as well, but those are the main ones that I have encountered, and then I'll talk about some of the solution elements that I've successfully put in place. And successfully sometimes isn't as successful, but that I've tried to put in place. There you go. So the first one is culture. Culture, because InnerSource, as has been mentioned actually several times, including the great presentation earlier by Gartner. It was the keynote this morning. It's something that needs to be built in, and people start doing it by themselves if done well, and it's the best way to do it. So culture is something that actually takes time. You don't step into an organization and say, we're going to change everything right now. It actually, people have habits. People have always done it the same way. It's actually easier when you have a high turnover because newer people that come in can be told this is how we do things. And of course, they will do things like that. But if you tell people who have been doing things differently, this is now how we need to do these things, it's going to take time. Think turning an ocean liner. It's that kind of thing. But once it's turned and when it's going forward and the culture has changed, it will actually be a lot more helpful. So the kind of bad habits we've seen is, first of all, people aren't used to using others' code, right? When you want to do something, the first thing is, I'm going to write a piece of code that does that. And it leads to reinventing the wheel. It leads to having multiple libraries or bits of code that do the exact same thing in many places. And each of these needs to be maintained, obviously, for whoever is using them. So the first one, that is interesting is reusability, and people aren't used to that. Silos also help or don't help, depending on how you look at this, with not using others' code. If your organization is siloed, or if your development teams are siloed, then typically the code is somewhere else than where you used to looking for it, and you might not even know of its existence. Having a great portal will help that, but we'll talk about that later. Also, the bad habits. Why should I be spending time on fixing code? Actually, I could just report a bug or use something else or write it by myself. And why should I spend time publishing my code? I wrote the software. It's for me, it's for my team, it's for my project. But honestly, do I really need to publish that software? What is it going to help? What's in it for me, right? So those are the kind of bad habits that I've seen and heard from honestly most people that have made moving to InnerSource harder. Okay. Hierarchy. That's another one that is really often an issue. Hierarchy is going to stop the people who are trying to do this thing from doing it conveniently and easier. Right? The typical manager has a team that's developing software, and they're happy that this software is being developed. They're getting the visibility for it, and they're controlling who writes what. They have these code reviews processes when somebody is submitting something new and so on. The problem here is that it's a wrong perception. Obviously, you're not losing visibility. You're actually getting more visibility if more people are using your project. You're not losing control because when somebody proposes a contribution, you still have to review it and decide whether or not you're going to accept it. So these are fears. These are real fears, but they're just fears. They're not. They don't translate to a reality. The other issue I've heard from developers, and this actually very, very recently, worse, to an organization who's used to doing open source, is, wait, my developer is going to waste time for which I'm paying them to do this activity. Why should they do that? Right? How do I actually get the money to my budget for my developer working on somebody else's code? Of course, again, wrong perception, right? When you're working on fixing somebody else's code, you're making it better for your use. So that's the real problems that people have been expressing multiple times when starting to set up an inner source activity, right? And of course, what's in it for me? Yeah, if you're a manager and you have people working for you, and you decide to let them, or even better, that would be great, right? Encourage them to contribute to inner source activities. Why do I do that as a manager? What's going to be in it for me? And of course, we've heard throughout the day, yesterday afternoon and today, that better code quality, faster time to market, or faster time to development of code, better knowledge and sharing and skills, all of that. But initially, the typical hierarchy reaction will be that is, why should I want to do that? It's going to be spending time and resources. So keep that in mind. You're going to have, if you're setting up this type of process inside the organization, you're going to hit hierarchy. I put it in second because it's culture is the long one, but to be honest, hierarchy is often the first one you hit. When you start talking about setting up inner source, you have all kinds of people raising hand and saying, I'm not sure I want to do that. So keep that in mind. It's going to hit you. Process. Sometimes it's just going to be a pain in the backside. Again, in the session, in the keynote from Gartner, if you're not going to make it easy, it's going to be slowed down or even stopped. So you have to make it simple to contribute. The more processes you put in place, the harder it's going to be. I have an organization that I work with who has all kinds of strange processes that you need to get approval before you can actually consider contributing and doing a pull request. And every pull request has to be examined by a central review committee before it's even looked at by the project owners and maintainers, which is like, why? When they're doing their own code, they're reviewing it first, and then it's getting approved for pushing it to larger applications. But suddenly, for inner source, it needs to be reviewed first by some central organization. Why would you want to do that? Make it simple. Pull request, and worse, actually, they're even in this organization, they're even saying, no, you can't actually do a pull request. First, you have to fork the project, do modifications, and then processes will slow you down. So you have to start realizing, and me as an external consultant, it's sometimes a steep learning curve because you have all of these processes in place, you have all these policies, you have these procedures, and you suddenly have to fit in this new model of sharing code and knowledge and contributions, and then everything gets, slowed down. As an internal driver, you already know all of these processes, hopefully, but you might have to start engaging with other people, because suddenly you're going to be talking to people, who look at what you're doing in terms of shared development as a risk. So you have to talk to risk people or security people, because your code is visible to all kinds of teams. Sometimes internal code can be shared with some teams and not all of them. And, or as Wolfgang mentioned, sometimes you have to think if you're a distributed international organization, how am I going to handle the tax part if my software is being developed in multiple countries and then my stuff is sold elsewhere? So think about it and look around, make sure that you address everybody before they hit you with, you can't do that way. It'll help. Never hesitate to ask your colleagues and other resources, how to do things, especially because setting up a new culture will require new ways of looking at things. And so ask around. Don't try to figure it out by yourself. This is even more important when you're an external consultant, as I am, because everything is going to be learning and asking. And don't be afraid to do so. If you don't ask, you're either going to mess up or not progress. And of course, all of these processes, learning them, identifying them, putting them into action takes time. So you might want to say, yep, it's time to do InnerSource, put all the repos open, let everybody contribute, but no, you're going to have to be patient because it's going to take the time to set up all of these and understand all of these processes. So some of the solutions I've got a parenthesis that's backwards. My Lisp programming days are long gone. So some of the solutions for working around this. Well, first of all, leading by example. If you're an internal resource and you're a developer or you're a manager of a developer and you have the opportunity to contribute already to publish code, do it. Talk about it. Show people that it can be done. Because if you're changing a culture, the first thing people will say is, I don't know how to do this. I don't even think it's possible. Yes, it is. Look, I've done it. So lead by example is a perfect way. And those are the InnerSource champions, if you want, that were mentioned earlier. InnerSource champions, people who've done something like that elsewhere. Maybe they're open source specialists that you just hired and they're used to sharing their code and creating public repos and sharing their stuff and engaging with communities. Have them do it. Tell them they can do it. Or do it yourself and show the example. Create code sharing opportunities. I heard a really good term this morning that I hadn't heard before, and it's called culture hacks. Hackathons for culture hacks. I love that term. How do you change a culture? Well, you create these opportunities for teams to talk, work, share together, exchange knowledge, collaborate on tools. We've organized some of these workshops and it worked well because people suddenly realized, oh, wait, there's a library that does this kind of stuff. And I was looking into something like that. There's this workshop around it. Let me join and learn what this does. And maybe, I can use it. So organize these opportunities, and that's really important, but these activities that are used to set up InnerSource culture, consider them to be InnerSource to be how do you say startup activities. Don't create a culture of doing these things to move InnerSource, because at some point, if you stop doing them, InnerSource will stop moving. So set them up to create a culture, and this is going to be even more important for the reward part. But make sure they understand that it's to create visibility and things like that. Explain, educate. Organize webinars, workshops again, show people, publish information, document, create mailing lists, communication, sharing successes. That's really good, actually, when somebody can say, oh, by the way, I've published this piece of code. If you have a portal, of course, that's fantastic. That's actually the best way to do things. But sometimes you don't already have one. So mailing lists to share knowledge. A room in a Jabber system, something or Teams team can help, because you will need to share that knowledge, and sometimes just the portal isn't there. Think about rewards, gamification. If people do things, put their names on a screen that they've done something really good, have goodies, have prices. Again, temporarily, make sure it's seen as temporary, not as a common way to reward development. You might have other mechanisms in place. So those are the kind of solutions that I've put in place and seen work quite nicely in order to start an inner source process and culture inside an organization. I think I've reached the 15 minutes I've been given to talk, so we can open the Q&As.